Well, good evening everyone and welcome to the Ordinary Council meeting of Wyndham City Council this Tuesday the 5th of March 2019. In the spirit of reconciliation, before we begin this meeting, I acknowledge the peoples of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which Wyndham is being built. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and to Aboriginal people here tonight. Please stand for the opening prayer and welcome. We pray for guidance in the Council's decision-making to achieve the best outcome for the people of Wyndham. Please be seated. I would like to welcome members of the gallery, press, councillors and staff here tonight for the Ordinary Council meeting. Some of you may have seen the notices in the foyer, but for those who didn't, I would like to make you aware of the following. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the internet. The recording will be archived and made available on Council's website. Whilst all care has been taken to ensure that your privacy is maintained, please be aware that your presence may be recorded. Item 2, apologies and requests for leave. Madam CEO, do we have any apologies and requests for leave tonight?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No apologies received for this evening. We do, however, have a leave of absence, in fact, for yourself, Madam Mayor, to be granted from the 17th of April to the 26th of April 2019 inclusive.
Thank you. Councillors, do I have a mover for this motion? Item, I should say. Thank you, Councillor Gibbons. Councillors, do I have a seconder? Councillor Ahn. Thank you, councillors. I now put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 3, declaration by councillors of disclosure of conflict of interest, conflicting personal interest in any item of the agenda. Councillors, does anyone have conflicts of interest that they wish to declare in relation to tonight's agenda? Councillor John Gibbons.
Madam Mayor, I have a conflict to 6.4.1. My daughter and son will have property next year.
Thank you, councillor. Item 4, confirmation of minutes of previous meeting. That the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting held on Tuesday 5 February 2019 as prepared and circulated be confirmed. Councillors, do I have a mover for this motion? Councillor Peter Maynard. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Intaj Khan. Thank you, councillors. I now put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 5, deputations and presentations. There are nil this evening. Item 6. Item 6.1.1, response to petition 18/05, installation of a speed treatment to deter speeding on Grassbird Drive, Point Cook. The report is on pages 8 to 11. The recommendation is on page 8. There are nil attachments. Councillors, do I have a mover for this motion? Councillor Intaj Khan. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kim McElhiney. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Intaj Khan is the mover of this motion. Would you like to speak to it? Okay, thank you. Are there any other speakers for this item? Councillor Ahn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In August last year, concerned residents of Grassbird Drive raised the matters of vehicles speeding on the street via a petition to Council. Council have carefully considered the concerns raised and agree that traffic behaviours need addressing, particularly as there are many children using the road to go to schools and parks nearby. I'm concerned that 200 vehicles each day are considered as speeding and that the volume of 900 vehicles per day is anticipated to increase, as Grassbird Drive provides a key east-west link through this area of Point Cook. So something needs to be done. To this end, I am pleased to note that Council is not considering installing a treatment to slow down traffic, and that the recommendation is flexible enough to allow Council officers to liaise with residents on the actual type of treatment to be used at this and its location. The intent of this recommendation is to allow residents to have a say about changes that affect their streets and to minimize any inconvenience to local residents. And this is a good outcome, and shows the Council wants to work with residents on solutions that suit them. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ahn. Are there any other speakers for this item? Councillor Kim McElhiney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Madam.
Madam Mayor, I should say. I will be supporting the recommendation, but it is disappointing that so many people are driving over the speed limit. This will be funded through the Council's Safety 18-19 program at a cost of $8,000. I'd also like to say that I currently sit on the Westgate Road Safety Committee, and speed is one of the biggest issues that we have. Road safety is particularly important, concerning at present time, given that Victoria is experiencing double the number of fatalities for the same time in the same period last year. So I thank the residents for coming forward and advising of their concerns, and I hope this is fixed quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers on this item? Councillors, I now put this item to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? This motion is carried. Item 6.2, strategic reports. There are nil. Item 6.3.1, public art and collections policy. The report is on pages 12 to 15. The recommendation is on page 12, and the attachments are on pages 16 to 31. Councillors, do I have a mover for this motion? Councillor Tony Hooper, thank you. Councillors, do I have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Heather Marcus, thank you. Councillor Hooper is the mover of this motion. Would you like to speak to it?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Mayor. As the Council's Arts, Culture and Heritage Portfolio holder, it gives me a lot of personal pleasure to support the motion to adopt Wyndham's new public art and collections policy. This policy provides a strategic and sustainable framework for public art and collections in Wyndham City for the first time in our history. So this is a significant achievement tonight. The policy has been benchmarked against other public art policies and programs and is informed by emerging trends in public art and collections management. I've spoken often of how public art is the most readily accessible of art forms and one of the true indicators of a healthy community. It can bring people together. It reflects communities and builds a strong sense of local place and identity. It can be playful, whimsical, and help activate urban places and promote public activity, providing warmth and connection to city streets and to our community as a whole. Public art can also stimulate private investment and development in our town centres and other places. The inclusion of public art in public places and buildings is a key design principle for creating spaces that support public safety, amenity and connection. And let's not forget, this encourages local employment. The strategies in this policy place public art central to the ongoing development of Wyndham City as a vibrant, creative and engaged city. The policy also provides Wyndham's civic collections. The policy will guide our commissioning and collecting activities to ensure that they are innovative, include different types of art and respond rapidly to changing contexts and technologies. I note that the policy has been out for public exhibition and consultation for an extended period of time, and the community has provided positive feedback in support of Council's proposed directions. Community feedback demonstrated a wide and deep understanding in the community that art can build a connection between people and places, and that art and culture are highly valued. In fact, all we have to do is look at the Music in Our City program, which has evolved into the program that was done just recently in Station Place, and how many people were coming to that.
One more minute, Councillor.
Thank you. I'm personally pleased to see that this policy has been seen as being accessible, concise and easy to read, and that the goals and strategies are clear and comprehensive. One comment from the community has caught my eye, and that was public art reinforces the expression and sentiment of the people in our local community. Madam Mayor, I'm confident the public art and collections policy will deliver on its objectives through innovative and high quality outcomes, something that the people of this community will be absolutely proud to see over years to come. Therefore, I recommend this to my colleagues. Thank you all.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Councillors, are there any other speakers for this item? Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a passionate and lifelong supporter of the arts in Wyndham, I'm really thrilled to support the motion to adopt Wyndham's public art and collection policy. I have committed my life to the arts as both a practitioner and a consumer. So I'm very happy to support the policy before us tonight. I was a little bit concerned about the contemporary part, but I've had many conversations with our officers and they assure me that all forms of art will be put forward and we will get on. We won't just sit and talk about it, we are going to have action and we will make sure that we get out to all the community. I believe that public art should be available to the whole community. And it will offer a range of different work for everyone to enjoy, the young, the old, those who have been part of this community for a very long time, which is very important, and to our newly arrived people, because they can teach us many things that we perhaps might not be seeing. So we have the best of both worlds. And that is why it is such an important evening tonight for the arts and the culture in Wyndham. The new public and arts and collection policy provides an invaluable blueprint to guide us into the future. We have many, many beautiful works of art that we have collected over the years, and I'd like to see a lot of those come out of the archives and let the people see exactly what we have collected over the years. I understand there is a well-considered implementation plan in place to ensure it delivers the very best public art to our community. So that answers all of my concerns that I've had. I would like to say
1 minute, please, Councillor.
I would like to say that I would like to thank Jenny, Donna, Chris, for the work that they've put in it. They always invite me to all the art shows and I'm happily going along. The music, the dancing, and if I've got my way, we're going to have Dancing with the Stars in this city, and then we'll get to having many more. So that's what we've got planned for the future. So, Madam Mayor, I believe this policy provides Council with a very clear direction to grow, support and strengthen this aspect of our community's life into the future. And this is one of the reasons why I endorse this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Are there any other speakers for this item? Councillors, I now put this item and this motion to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? This motion is carried. Item 6.3.2, Service and Asset Policy and Framework. The report is on pages 32 to 34. The recommendation is on page 32 and the attachments are on pages 35 to 41. Councillors, do I have a mover for this motion? Councillor Henry Barlow. Councillors, do I have a seconder? Councillor Peter Maynard. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Barlow, would you like to speak to this motion?
Extremely briefly, Madam Mayor, because this service and asset policy and framework that we've been working on is going out to public exhibition. So I don't want to colour this report in any way. It'll be up to the public over the next 28 days until Wednesday, the 3rd of April, I believe, to make comment. I think it's important that the public do make comment on this report. I could talk about this in some level, but if we look at the first paragraph on page 32 of the report, I think it says it all. And so I'll leave it at that, but fully supportive of it, and I look forward to see what the community's got to say.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Are there any other speakers on this item? Councillor Kim McElhiney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to speak in support of the recommendation to release the draft service and asset policy and framework for public exhibition. This policy and framework signals Wyndham's commitment to taking a strategic, long-term approach to planning of services and infrastructure. It aims to provide a stated and overarching strategic approach to guide us in the future decision-making. It's about planning and fiscal responsibility that sets up to respond to the needs of the community today and to adapt to the needs of the community tomorrow. And I remind us all that this city will double in the next 20 years. Service planning should be the first and foremost in the planning of assets. It is important to understand our assets only exist to facilitate the delivery of services. Placing importance on service planning gives the confidence that we are responding directly to community needs and not just delivering a cookie cutter approach to infrastructure delivery. This approach sets us up to understand 1, what we need, 2, where we need it, and 3, how we deliver it. Measuring service and asset performance is fundamental to continuing improvement and good decision making. It's also focused on how we consider our services and assets as a network so that across neighbourhoods and communities we connect our service models, and particularly in recent times that's what we've been doing. The principles outlined in the policy are outcome focused, agile, efficient, accessible, integrated and transparent. We welcome the community to provide us with feedback on this policy, and as Councillor Barlow said, I think it's the 3rd of April that it closes, and in particular to test if we have the principles right to inform our future plans. I commend this recommendation to the Chamber, and I thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers on this item? Councillor Maynard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be short as well. I think just to echo the comments of my fellow councillors, the 5 dot points on page 33 that were mentioned, I think they completely explain what we're trying to do. I look forward to the feedback from residents, but it just shows what this council is doing, thinking outside the square in analysing what residents need now and into the future, and a process to provide that. So I commend the report. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. And then any other speakers on this item? Councillors, I now move this, put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 6.3.3, Notice of Motion Response, Single Use of Plastics report is on pages 42 to 53. The recommendation is on page 43 and the attachments are on pages 54 to 57. Councillors, do I have a mover for this motion? Councillor Marcus. Councillors, do I have a second for this motion? Councillor Hooper. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Marcus, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This has been a real passion of mine and I've thought about it long and hard, and as you know, this did come before this council in December the 3rd, and I think what the council officers have done, they have gone back, they've researched everything, and I think everything is covered in this policy. I hope I've got 5 minutes, Madam Mayor.
Yes, you do.
Thank you. And so I've gone back a little while, and I want to tell you all, I had a wonderful childhood growing up on a very large farm where everything was sustainability plus. Large orchards, veggie gardens, fresh meat, milk and meat. No plastic anywhere, not even in the supermarkets of those days. We all took our lunch to school in greaseproof paper and brown bags, and when we finished, we folded it up and we took it home to be used over and over again.
Remember that?
Sorry?
I remember that.
Yes. In 1974, when I started my retail business, most of us did not use plastic bags. We had beautiful brown bags with string holders. And all of our stock arrived in cardboard boxes. So again, where did we go wrong? Because the plastic started arriving just after that in trucks, and so everything came on a plastic coat hanger in a plastic bag, and then we came to council and said, council, and they didn't want to know us because we had copious amounts of plastic. So as I've said on many occasions, we have created this waste and litter monster, and if we do not work together, it will never ever be eradicated. It is the scourge of to our environment, and sadly it's getting worse by the week. So now it is the time that we all come together to look at action, not just words. The Collins Dictionary selected single use as its word of the year in 2018, and it's not difficult to understand why. Plastic waste is a global issue, and to combat it we need leadership from all levels. Single-use plastics continue to be discarded at alarming rates. We are throwing away about 9 billion single-use plastic items per year. Our dedicated local clean-up groups are constantly picking these items up, with many items finding their way into our waterways, impacting on both the amenity of our city and environment that we are to protect. I did attend the last clean-up down with Lisa Field and her wonderful volunteers, and I was horrified to see what they picked up in 1.5 hours. Coffee cups, drink containers with plastic tops and plastic after plastic straws. So a big thank you. I'm not sure whether Lisa is here with us tonight. And I know Bruce Boddington is the same in Point Cook, so thank you to Bruce. On a global scale, we have witnessed a number of nations, cities and organisations commit to bans, which include the European Parliament, Canada. If you go into McDonald's in Canada, you don't get anything plastic, you get it on a plate, a crockery plate. And it's wonderful to see that New Zealand now has gone one step further, and they call theirs nude food. So when you go to the supermarket, you have to take your little cloth bag, you get your fruit, put it in the bag, you take it home, you wash the bag and off you go. So well done to New Zealand. Local festivals such as the Queenscliff Music Festival and the Serpentine Festival are leading the way when it comes to plastic pollution with these events over summer, achieving over 90% diversion from landfill through similar bans. The zoos are leading the way.
One more minute, councillor.
Okay. And they're not allowing any plastic in any of their zoos, and also a lot of the hotel chains. Darebin, Geelong, Surf Coast and Maribyrnong are all paving the way with their own bans across their facilities and events. This is about leadership. Whilst this policy may have a small impact in the scheme of the issue, it will demonstrate to our community that we are too leading the fight. I will continue to fight for even more restraints in the future because I'm very concerned. I would like to thank some of the members of our environment portfolio here tonight, and they have worked extremely hard making sure that we're protecting our environment. The revised report provides all of the requested derail and associated costs that were raised at the December OCM, leaving nothing more to do, and that is in supporting, and I hope my fellow councillors will be supporting us tonight with this proposed ban. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Do I have any other speakers on this item? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, just before I go into my notes, I do want to talk about the amount of waste I've seen pulled out of our creeks. Skeleton Creek one time there, just along Wallace Avenue, and everyone knows how small Wallace Avenue is in Point Cook. There was almost 2 tonnes of garbage pulled out of one day. Absolutely phenomenal. The amount of waste that people throw into our creeks and our native spaces, it's just phenomenal. But the reason I'm speaking is I'm very pleased to see that the concerns I raise, that the need of some people with disability have been taken into account in this report, and that's the use of plastic straws. Which I believe my concerns have also been shared by the Wyndham Community Disability Advisory Committee, Disability Australia and Scope Australia, who all were consulted in the preparation of the report on the single-use plastic ban. Feedback from all agencies demonstrated support of keeping plastic straws available for those who need them. This is due to the fact that biodegradable straws can melt and other environmentally friendly alternatives such as bamboo and metal straws do not bend, although I do believe that there's an avocado seed one which we are yet to investigate. That's probably a few years down the track. The proposed exemption will apply where council serves food and beverages, tuck shop, Encore and Cultural Centre, meaning that plastic straws will be available when required. I understand that during the transition periods, appropriate signage will be prepared for each of these facilities, identifying that plastic straws are available. This acknowledges that whilst everyone understands the concerns of the planet, for some people in this community, part of their community experience, as recommended by Scope Australia, requires plastic straws. Madam Mayor, I'm also aware that Council will work with our Community Disability Advisory Committee on the design, wording and shape of the signage and explore other environmentally friendly alternatives. It's absolutely critical that we respect all members of our community, so I'm pleased to see this and happy to support it now going forward. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Do I have any other speakers on this item? Councillor McAliney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr
Madam
Madam
Mayor.
Mayor, God, I'm going well.
No, we're non-sex, so it's good.
Sorry. Firstly, I just commend the report. I think it's very good, and I will be supporting the report tonight. I was blown away with some of the comments in it, particularly, you know, what we're trying to do, but Coles and Woolworths bags have dropped 80% and 1.5 billion bags in 3 months. That's just amazing in shopping bags alone. So just how much, what can council do in a short period of time? One of the things that I'm comfortable with also that it's going to take, there's a transition period of 6 months to ensure that we can implement some of these actions. I agree with the straws, so I'm very happy with that. So, and I know Councillor Hooper is happy on that regard. Leaseholders, sporting clubs and community buildings will not be affected, which I consider reasonable. And I look forward to them being implemented, and I'll have to change some of my ways. So, yeah, so congratulations, Heather. I know you work very hard, and I believe the additional time gave all the departments the opportunity to really think outside the square and look at the impact it was going to have, and the cost is minimal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers on this item? Councillors, I now put this motion.
Well, there's no one against.
There's no one against. Thank you, Councillor. So, Councillors, I now put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 6.3.4, the 2019 Australian Local Government Association National General Assembly motions. The report is on pages 58 to 61. The recommendation is on page 58, and there are nil attachments. Councillors, do I have a mover for this item? Councillor Barlow. Councillors, do I have a seconder? Councillor Hooper. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Barlow, would you like to speak to this item?
Look, the motions that have been put up here, Madam Mayor, are very important. I'd like to highlight, and I'll just go to the page number, page 60 in the report. I'm very interested in when you look at funding of local infrastructure. I think that, and it's great to see so many people in the chamber tonight, because a lot of people won't realise, may not know, that when the rate increases come along every year, they're actually determined by the state government and not by the 79 councils in Victoria. And that it's very difficult when people ask us, and we had it again at a meeting recently of our district advisory committees, when are we going to catch up with the infrastructure in our municipality? And unfortunately, the cost of infrastructure is increasing far greater than the cost of the increases in rates. And so where do you find those extra millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars if you don't get support, higher funding support from federal, state governments to help local government in achieving it? And we all know that one of the reasons why our municipality is growing so fast is based on policy decisions by the federal government in bringing, and they should of course, bring in tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of new migrants into Australia. And of course, everybody has got to live somewhere, and we just happen to be one of a number of councils that are one of the main areas for people to come and live in, not only because it's a great place to live, but housing is still reasonably affordable. So when we look at talking to federal and state government, it's important that our peak federal body is at the forefront of actually making sure that the federal government, in my view in particular, should be well aware of their responsibility in helping fund growth councils such as ours based on the decisions that they make. And I think that if that was something that we could get them to agree to, and we are members of the National Growth Areas Alliance, which is 21 growth councils around Australia, which we are a major player in. is very, very important. And so out of these are all well and worthy motions that we are going to put up at the National Conference. But whenever a local resident here talks to me about infrastructure and, why can't we keep up, I would suggest that we are doing our absolute 110% best, but it's up to the feds and the state government to a great degree to actually come up with that funding. And so thanks for your opportunity of speaking on that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Councillor Maynard, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The 5 motions that are up, and I'll just speak a little on 2 of them. I know others will probably speak on the others. 2 that of particular interest to me, the trackless trams, which are an extremely interesting and, possibility in this city. Amazing. I've long said that, there's, I don't know how much longer motor cars will exist, but certainly in the foreseeable future. But one of the foremost opportunities to solve our congestion problems is far, far better public transport. And I certainly believe that this, a marrying of a tram and a bus, but they call it a tram, certainly a very interesting thing. The other thing, of course, is the kindergarten funding cuts, which this council has been quite explicit in what it would like to see the feds do come the next election and post the December of this year, to allow our early years for 15 years of kindergarten. So I commend the report to my fellow councillors. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Maynard. Are there any other speakers on this item? Councillor Marcus? No, Councillor Marcus? No, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. On page 59, where it says, what can local governments do differently now and into the future to deliver more or less? I really think we have to be a lot more creative to get those, because I remember back in 2010, when I was the mayor, we kept saying, if there is no infrastructure, there is no growth. We did it again in 2013, and I think I've said it a few times now in the chamber. We're now up to 2019. And as Councillor Maynard said, we've been lobbying for that extra funding also, but that may very well come through. I like the idea of the trackless trams, and when Councillor Hawkins was here, he suggested trams to run all around Wyndham, didn't he?
I thought it was
up here, down Derrimut Road, down here.
Okay, but I've travelled extensively overseas, and Australia is a long way behind in many, many things. And when I was travelling overseas with English truck drivers in trucks, the big trucks never ever entered the city of Paris, Czechoslovakia, Slovenia, Slovakia. So they had to be, it was a ring road, and I think that's what we need to be doing here now. So I would like that put into one of these motions, that big trucks are kept out of our cities, kept out of all of our little cities. But the other thing is the trucks were not allowed to go or drive on a Sunday. And if they did, and yes, we did, there was a hefty fine for doing so. So that's one thing that I just think we should look at, because the state government is now putting in tunnels and they're doing a whole lot of things, but it's still not going to keep the trucks out of our cities. And I think that's something that we should be encouraging them to do, is to make sure that there's ring roads and the big trucks do not come into our cities, full stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillor Hooper?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I was just going to briefly touch on a couple of points that Councillors Maynard and Marcus have touched on, which was the trackless tram technology. Now, I know we've gone on about it a little bit already, but I really do urge people to check out on YouTube and Google what that actually means for us, well, for any city. And reason it's important to bring up now, we go through PSP processes, Williams Landing is going through one which was landed 20 years ago and still doesn't have a school or anything like that in there. We have planning instruments that are signed off by the state government that bind us to what's going to happen in the future. Now, we look at Apple, we look at Google. We don't know what technology is going to be like 10 years down the track, let alone 20, 30 or 40. And yet these are the environments that we're supposed to be dealing in. So I really applaud this being included in the submission because it's saying, let's look at the future. Let's look at trends that are going to happen down the track with technology that we can see being developed today that could make the lives of everyone much better and actually activate our public transport, which we know is absolutely deficient in the city. So thank you very much for everyone for having the forethought for putting this together. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Are there any other speakers on this item? Well, councillors, I now put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? Motion is carried. Item 6.4, Strategic and Town Planning. Item 6.4.1, Amendments C236 and C239, Heritage Overlay, Carter Avenue and Manor Estate, Werribee. The report is on pages 62 to 74. The recommendation is on page 63 and the attachment is on page... There are no attachments. Thank you, Councillor Gibbons. Councillors, do I have a mover for this item? Councillor Hooper. Councillors, do I have a seconder? Councillor Villagonzalo, thank you. Councillor Hooper, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper.
Got to throw some humour in here. As Council's portfolio holder for Heritage, I'm very pleased to support the motion tonight. I'm sometimes asked what my portfolio involves and what heritage actually means. My response to that is it's a celebration of things that people value, whether they are objects, specific places, buildings, things of architectural significance, and even cultural traditions. It is essentially where we were from and where we are today, yesteryear and yesterday. The amendments before us tonight are proposing planning scheme amendments, and these therefore have specific process requirements. This is the first formal step where we will seek the Minister for Planning's approval to proceed with the process to enable us to celebrate and formally acknowledge through planning controls 2 locally significant historical precincts which have been identified in heritage studies. The manor is a site of local significance to the City of Wyndham as it reveals the location of the now demolished Manor Estate and Gardens built by Percy Chirnside in 1896. I note the discussion in the report that the Heritage Alliance study has identified further evidence of a number of trees, movable structures such as a horse trough and 2 stone columns, and architectural remnants such as buried brickwork beneath established homes, steeped stones in Werribee River, a 20th century pump and well. Also note that in relation to the manor remnants, recent works by the Rotary Club of Wyndham and the Werribee River Association has seen 2 columns found in the Werribee River concrete in place of a podium in the council reserve adjacent to Werribee River. The second proposed heritage amendment we are considering tonight includes acknowledging the houses in the Carter Avenue precinct, such as the rare housing estate type. The Carter Avenue precinct was a workers' estate built from 1940 to 42 and into the 1960s by the Carter brothers poultry farmers for the benefit of its employees. Some might say this sort of historical model of employers providing housing for employees should be practiced more today, although I acknowledge that this is not a matter of our consideration tonight, Madam Mayor, or Mr. Mayor, or every mayor. Returning to the motion, I note that both amendments align with council objectives relating to recognising and protecting its heritage places and will encourage development that respects identified heritage values. This work will help residents appreciate the history and development of our municipality and will be of great value for future generations. Madam Mayor, this motion is another example of council leading when it can to formally recognise the significant places and areas of heritage value to the community. I therefore recommend the motion as being worthy of support from my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Are there any other speakers on this item? Councillor Marcus.
Thank you very much. As Councillor Hooper advised, this is the first stage of the process in this policy. Sadly, there's little left of the Manor Estate, which was Percy Chirnside's residence, and I would like to thank, and Mr Forrester's in this audience tonight, for the work that the River Association did on fishing the columns out of the river back in about 2007 when we had the drought. And you never guess what they did to me. They said, you get up there, stand on the path, and if you see the council coming, sing out. Because we didn't get a permit to get the columns out the river. So, you know, the River Association have worked really, really hard on the river, and it's wonderful to think that those columns came out, although we could only get one out, and Melbourne Water had to come and get the second one because it was too heavy. And it's great. We've talked to the Chirnside family. Percy Chirnside's great-grandson said if council weren't going to do anything with the columns, they wanted them back. But that, thankfully, the work, and Jeff Rogers is here tonight. He's also worked very hard on it. And so the columns with the grant, I think the Rotary Club got a grant through Joanne Ryan for $5,000. No. Oh, okay. They got a grant anyway. So thank you to the Rotary Club for the grant. So the columns have been installed and will be there for everyone. Also, as you can see, I love history, and I've worked pretty hard on the history since I've been here. The Carter family. Not many people sitting here tonight would probably know about the Carter family. There were two brothers, and I have been informed that their egg farm was the biggest in the world, and they were very, very generous people, and they built 90 houses so that they could have housing for their staff.
One more minute, Councillor Marcus.
Well, I have to hurry, won't I? Busloads of tourists would drive around the estate having their photos taken, and of course there is still 3 stately Carter mansions still standing today, and Mr Wally Carter's daughter still lives here. Sadly, many of these Carter houses have been demolished, and in Carter Avenue such is the case. So we do need to preserve our history, and I believe this development was very unique and still is to this day. The appropriateness of the proposed heritage overlay. The land is subject to development pressure, with development proposals recently received by council, including homes in Carter Avenue. A contributory dwelling at 38 Carter Avenue was demolished in 2017 and replaced with a contemporary double 2 dwelling, which you will see in the report. Without any form of guidance on appropriate development of or adjacent to a heritage place, council runs the risks of demolition of the Carter homes and inappropriate development impacting on the integrity and the significance of the precinct. We have to remember, though, that the heritage overlay does not prevent a landowner from seeking extensions to their homes. And so I do agree with the recommendation listed here in the agenda tonight, and I do understand that people may have bought in and now they're concerned what the heritage overlay will bring, but I don't really think the concerns are that great when you can extend on those properties if you wish to. My family have been through this and they cope very well with what the heritage overlay people put on their buildings, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Are there any other speakers on this item? Councillors, I now put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 6.4.2, planning application, WYP 1. Oh, sorry, yes, Councillor Gibbons, we better get him back. Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Yeah. I'll start that again. Item 6.4.2, planning permit application WYP 10958/18 for use and development of a recovered energy generation facility at 28 Alex Fraser Drive, Laverton North. The report is on pages 75 to 101. The recommendation is on pages 77 to 84, and the attachments are on pages 102 to 108. Councillors, do I have a mover for this item? Councillor Maynard. Councillors, do I have a seconder? Councillor Hooper. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Maynard, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Having had the opportunity to visit Europe last year with council officers, we firsthand saw the sort of technology that we have in front of us tonight. I think it's extremely important just to acknowledge the fact that we are granting a permit, a planning permit, that has 35 permit conditions to it. And I would just like to highlight on page 84 a footnote that says, this planning permit is not an EPA works approval or licence before the use and development authorised under this permit starts. The permit holder must ensure any obligations or duties that arise under the EPA Act 1970 are met. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Maynard. Are there any other speakers on this item? Councillor Ahn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I felt I could not support this recommendation due to concerns about potential impacts of offset environment. Given the proposed facility is so close to existing food processing facility and the approved Melbourne Fresh Distribution Centre development, which is on adjacent site. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ahn. Are there any other speakers on this item? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I just wanted to be really brief on this. I will be supporting this tonight. The actual permit does mention the fact that the works approval needs to go to the EPA. They will need to make assessment based on the environmental impacts of the site. And as we've seen just recently, the EPA is no longer a toothless tiger. No one could argue that. It is capable of making very drastic decisions that need to be made. And I think that after the last month, we really need to look at alternative ways of managing our waste, ones that are more environmentally friendly and actually give back to the community broadly. Now, this is the private sector stepping up and providing that answer. So actually happy to see this happen tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Are there any other speakers on this item? Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think, if this can go ahead, I think this is what is really needed for the city. As we all know that China is not accepting recycled because most of the recycle coming out of parts of Australia is very contaminated. I'm told that Western Australia have clean recycled, so we need to see how they're doing it and what they're doing. Because we have, as I said before when I spoke on our motion, the problems that we have and the amount of litter. I've been able to get my household waste down to half a little bag per week, and if we didn't have the salon, I wouldn't even have a household bin but it's the recycle that is the problem with all the plastic, the boxes and absolutely everything else. So this, I think, if this is a long way off, so this, what we must remember, this is a long way off. It's got to go through a lot of planning, and I know our council officers will be looking at absolutely every one of the 35 items on this agenda, and I was going to mention the footnote, but it's been mentioned twice already tonight. But I just hope and pray that this facility will get up and will alleviate the problems that we've got here in Australia, to make sure that we can put our waste to energy and it comes back as electricity and things like that. So I just hope that it will go ahead, and I think we will have to push very hard for it.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Are there any other further speakers on this item? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I will be supporting this. I think this is a great project to be proposed in our city. It will be a 35 metres height and 11,500 square metre in a facility industrial area, which is the connected authorities road. And beauty about it will be 24/7 open 7 days. So that's a great, and we'll add to our city about 10 staff. So it creates employment in the city. And I think as other councillors have agreed and said enough about how much we really be looking at this kind of private companies to become forward and solve the problem we all face on day to day, particularly when we're looking at there's a lot of waste, going and we're not utilising it, and now the new technology, we're behind. But this is a project is great, and I'm happy to be, even though I have a concern about EPA, but I think it's clearly mentioned that this project would not go ahead until as they will get EPA approval. So the planning permit is subject to the conditions, and that means is we are safe. EPA will take care of it. If there's any problems, they will not allow the permit to go ahead with it. So they have to meet the requirement of the EPA. So in that regard, I feel satisfied that we should be supporting it. And EPA, even though they made a state declaration saying that EPA have no objection at this stage, but we have not seen any approval from the EPA. And we believe so now that it will happen, and we'll all look forward to see that in West energy can be a great invention, so we can utilize the West into the electricity. I'll look forward to see that it's a great project, and thanks for the council to be bold and approving this kind of facilities, even though it's close to some, as Councillor Anne have said, that facilities, but I think we have to take decisions, and this is a great way of going ahead. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Are there any other speakers on this item? Councillor Maynard, as the mover of the motion, there's been a speaker against. Would you like to exercise your right of reply?
I would, Madam Mayor.
Thank you
very much. Whilst I understand the concerns that Councillor Arm has raised, one of the plants that we visited in Switzerland was, I believe, 500 metres from houses. 500 metres. So the technology that's being used today is state of the art, and I have no doubt that the EPA will ensure that this organisation that's proposing to build such a plant, which, just to mention, is 600 tonnes of waste a day. So it's 4,000, roughly 4,200 tonnes a week, 200,000 tonnes a year. As I've been told on a number of occasions, and I must correct, we do get a lot of waste in the city, and in 16-17 it was 500,000 tonnes. Now, because of a number of issues that we've had with our latest works approval, it's 370,000 tonnes. So, and that is only going to double because people are going to make waste. And unfortunately, or fortunately, this type of facility is needed. And with the technology that we have these days, if we go by anything that's occurring in Europe, is state of the art and is well within close proximity of houses. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Maynard. So, councillors, I now put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 6.5, other reports. Item 6.5.1, adoption of Wyndham City Property Portfolio Policy. The report is on pages 109 to 112. The recommendation is on page 109, and the attachments are on pages 113 to 120. Councillors, do I have a mover for this item? Councillor Khan. Councillors, do I have a seconder? Councillor McAliney. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Khan, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I think it's a great pleasure to me to make a comment on a property portfolio, and I do have experience in properties, so I would like to make a thank you to the council to bringing that policy in, putting in place. It's important, council, to recognise when need to do acquisitions, when often, and we are a growing city, so we'll have to be very mindful because we meet the requirement of the community, because community needs a park, community needs a community centres and other things. This policy will cover the wider range of the transactions. Since we are growing council, there will be future transactions with land acquisitions, land explorations, so many things. So it's important to have that portfolio in a place and the policy in a place when we should. But I like to say that now the council should be proactive, doing acquisitions the land has not been acquired, and there are a number of houses where we have land empty and park has not been built, or they in future we're going to build them. So council should be proactive. In doing so, we will save the money in future, because we know the land will go expensive, so that it won't come at the greater cost of the council's or taxpayers' money. So council's been quite proactive, but I think it's a great way of having a policy, saving the taxpayers' money and thinking forward in positive direction. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Are there any other speakers on this item? Councillor McAliney, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Wyndham City Property Portfolio Policy recognises that Council is a significant landowner, and our placement within the growth corridor means that we are required to participate more often in land transactions. We're expecting over in the next 20 years our local population to double to about 500,000 people. So having access to land in the right places is becoming increasingly important to us. This policy connects with so much of what we do and the important local service council provides. Services like libraries, maternal and child health, and places for our seniors to gather all need space to operate from. We also have a significant open space shortfall to address. Additional to that, this council has taken proactive intervention in the local economy through property projects, which means local jobs and economic growth. This policy clearly supports council strategies and plans to achieve their land aspirations so important local services can be planned for and delivered. I also think it's important to highlight that council through this policy now has a structured way to consider its property portfolio holistically. By that, I mean looking at opportunities to optimise and even repurpose some of our properties, and we're doing that right now. From a property perspective, this means we can better consider local services and also community services or organisations and how needs change over time. We did provide opportunity for the community to provide feedback to this policy, and while we had some downloads on Loop, we didn't get, there was not much feedback, if any at all. It's important to recognise this is about getting the best value, public value, and demonstrates to the community council's commitment to delivering an exciting vision for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have any other speakers on this item? Councillor Maynard, lucky. Very, yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to be short, as been alluded to previously, this council has certainly gone through a process and is now setting in place a policy and structure for acquisition of property or land in the city. And I think one of the things that's important and has been identified that we're going to have to do a bit of is the acquisition of land for active open space for our residents. Something that we are, I suppose, at loggerheads with those authorities that say that we need less and we tell them that we need more. So to get that land, we have to purchase it. Unfortunately, when we do so, we have to do so mainly through a third party. Because once somebody finds out the council's interested in their land, the price goes through the roof. It's apparent, apparently, well, you've got to, stoop to that sort of thing, which is unfortunate in this day and age. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Maynard. Councillors, are there any other speakers on this item? Councillors, I now put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 6.5.2, naming of a new community centre in Wyndham Vale, community consultation outcome. The report is on pages 121 to 124. The recommendation is on page 122 and there are nil attachments. Councillors, do I have a mover for this item? Councillor Hooper, do I have a seconder? Councillor Maynard, thank you, councillors. Would you like to speak to this item, Councillor Hooper?
I'll just be brief and I'll come from the heart on this one. I often speak about the need for respect of our community in all elements of it. I think this is one of the cases where Wyndham Council has absolutely put its best foot forward. We've developed a and not just an Indigenous community structure, but something that is welcoming for all of our communities together to actually learn from each other's experiences and to share each other's resources. And I think as a multicultural city, it's absolutely a feather in our cap to see that the broad community is embracing everyone in our communities. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Are there any other speakers on this item? Councillors, I now put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 6.5.3, Councillor Expense Report, July to December 2018. Yes, thank you. So the report is on pages 125 to 128. The recommendation is on page 125 and the attachment is on pages 129 to 130. Councillors, do I have a mover for this motion? Councillor Hooper, do I have a seconder? Councillor Barlow, thank you, councillors. Would you like to speak to this item, Councillor Hooper? Thank you. Do I have any other speakers on this item? Thank you, councillors. I now put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 6.5.4, Assembly of Councillors. The report is on page 131. The recommendation is on page 131. The attachment is on pages 132 to 134. Councillors, do I have a mover for this item? Councillor Maynard. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Arndt. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Maynard, would you like to speak to this motion?
No, Madam Mayor, only to say that we're all assembled.
Thank you very much, Councillor Maynard. Are there any other speakers on this item? Thank you, councillors. I now put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 7, notices of motion. So the next item on the agenda is notices of motion. There is one notice of motion on the agenda this evening. As I've asked for this notice of motion to be on the agenda, I am required to leave the chairing role for this item and ask the Deputy Mayor, Councillor John Gibbons, to chair this item.
Thank you, councillors. The Mayor has advised this item is a notice of motion, managing transport in Werribee City Centre. Madam Mayor, could you please indicate if you would like to move the motion, which is on the agenda?
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I would like to move this notice of motion.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Thank you. Thank you. Right. Councillors, we've got the seconder, that's fine. Thank you, councillor. Madam Mayor, would you like to speak to the motion? Thank you.
Yes, I would. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. So having recently taken over the Mayor's growth and transport portfolio and based on my own experiences travelling around Werribee, it has become increasingly apparent that we are dealing with a growing and unsustainable traffic and transport issue in our city centre. As we embark on the major projects to reinvigorate the Werribee City Centre, such as the new Holiday Inn, increased apartment-style living and high-rise commercial developments, not to mention the redevelopment of Wyndham Park, it is clear that we also need to consider the impact that increased patronage will have on traffic movements in the Werribee CBD. Feedback from residents is coming through loud and clear. Traffic congestion is a nightmare during peak times. There is an increase in trucks using Sinnott Street and sightlines are becoming more dangerous. And Councillor Marcus spoke about traffic movements in Europe when she was talking to item 6.3.4. We have car parks in places that block traffic flow and there is not enough car parking at the station and throughout the precinct overall. We have issues with traffic signals not being synced or turning arrows where needed to maximise traffic flow, and it's fair to say that the state government controlled medians and assets such as the Werribee train station are in need of further urgent upgrades, for example, signage and better placement of Myki readers. I'm also concerned about increased traffic flow to other areas of the city, such as Duncan's Road, with residents struggling to safely exit and access their properties on and off Duncan's Road. not to mention the intersections at Duncan's Road and Edwards Road and Wattle Avenue and Tower Road and Princess Highway requiring urgent attention. Access to the Riverside Industrial Precinct also needs to be looked at. It's ridiculous that access to this area is via the city centre and residential roads that abut schools, Werribee Secondary College, MacKillop College, Corpus Christi and Werribee Primary Schools. An entry and exit off the Princess Freeway needs to be looked at to ensure easier and safer access for the businesses in this important industrial area. Tonight's notice of motion is therefore about addressing these concerns and putting in place an action plan for what we as a council can do and what we need to advocate for. Year after year, the community tells us via the annual satisfaction survey that the management of traffic and transport is the most important issue affecting our city. And I believe that as a council, we have an opportunity to provide meaningful solutions at a local level. This review will look at areas of concern and highlight roles and responsibilities with a view to developing an action plan with short, medium and long-term solutions required to improve traffic flow in the Werribee City Centre. Tonight, I encourage my fellow councillors to support this notice of motion as it further supports our vision for developing a livable city centre with a bustling local economy. In my view, it would be irresponsible of us to continue down a path of encouraging increased activity without addressing the obvious traffic congestion and transport issues we are currently experiencing. As one of the ward councillors responsible for the Werribee City Centre, I believe it is my role to listen to what our community is telling us and do what we can within our own remit and then to advocate to others who are responsible. Despite our ongoing efforts, I don't feel that things are progressing as quickly as they should. The Werribee City Centre is a fantastic asset for Wyndham and what we have planned will only see this area become more attractive for people to live, work and visit, and let's make sure we get it right and ensure our residents and visitors are just as proud of it as we are. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Are there any further speakers for this?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I had to be fair. Look, I'm happy to support this motion tonight because it's an opportunity to look at the needs of tomorrow as well as today. And there's a number of things in this agenda tonight we've already gone through where we're looking at 2045. We know that the population of the city is going to practically double over that time frame. If the state government ever decides to make a decision on East Werribee Employment Precinct, that will change the traffic needs of the city overnight, from the building construction of that site to the daily users that actually work and play in that space, as well as the new residents. Wattle Avenue will be transformed in that time. It will go from the area that is today to thoroughfare 4 East Werribee Employment Precinct. We need to be smart and look at the overall needs of the city and in connection to the PSPs that we've got developing across our city. Now, previously I said that they were a pain, and they are, but there's a benefit from them, and we know where the development of the city is going to be. We know the shape of tomorrow, roughly speaking. So we can actually look at the needs of that space and have an informed transport policy or transport outcome, and that as a user of these roads, I'd love to see some improvements happening across our city. So I really look forward to seeing how this work unfolds and what actually transpires. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Any further speakers? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Look, I think what Madam Mayor have come out of the chair, and I think it's important. She's passionate about it. She's been as a mayor. She have the power to go and talk to the ministers, and we have a support for you for that. I think it's been this area particularly been left out for long. The previous government, the same government, have promised that they will do a level crossing and all that. We're still now seeing the result is still to be wait. So this has been impacted, and now we're looking at the new PSPs as Councillor Hooper is saying that now we might get to aviation PSP, and that will put more people on the road, as you know the minister have announced. So that means is now we're really looking at there's going to be more traffic on roads. Now, there will be more traffic, but what about the people are living here? We pay rates here, everybody pay rates here, but the morning, Sayers Road is a battle to go in the morning to the work. And it's just one of the examples. There are many roads like every day. People, one in the city, before anything, the road should be fixed. Now, council is doing his powers, but I think we need to request the residents to write a letter to the local member and say that, you know, if you took my vote, what I get in return? Do I get a road or do I get a vote again next time? It is important now because you put your trust in their hand. They should be looking after you. Now, I have been now 6 years in a council and I've seen that now the speed is very slow. The roads are not getting done as we expect. And what you just suggested about that now Waterloo Street, Senator Street, they're getting more busy because we're getting now the new housing approved, Memorial, there's a Wyndham Well, and there's a more project coming. That means we're attracting the more residents. I'm glad that city is offer affordable housing compared to the other part of the Melbourne, but is it becoming a problem for the existing resident who's living?
Councillor, one more minute.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. We do not have much infrastructure, and that is just every day. So I think we should put a war. We need a traffic. We need a traffic. So congestion, we should put a war on congestion. We need a traffic solutions. Otherwise, I think there's no fun driving here in luxury cars or any cars. It is a road is a disgrace. We pay a lot of taxes, including the cars and roads. So it's not good for any Ferrari or any Lamborghini. You're not going to get a good people out here to drive good cars. Thank you.
That's why I brought you.
I'll almost call a point of order. The club sport's pretty good.
Councillor Marcus.
Can't afford a Ferrari anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Gibbons. I was very pleased when Mia had the meeting with myself and Councillor Maynard to put up this notice of motion because I can see the Werribee CBD is almost at gridlock and people coming in from Geelong to work can't really come by train because if they come by train, they've got to get off the train at Manor Lakes and then find a bus in here, and so they're all going back to their cars. One young lady told me this morning she left Jan Juc. It took her half an hour to get from Jan Juc to the Western Interchange, and it took her 32 minutes to get from the Western Interchange into Watton Street. Now, that's happened to her every single day this week. So these are some of the things, and as other speakers have said, that this is what people, they're more interested in fixing our roads and our traffic and everything else than a whole lot of things. And I think this is something that we certainly really do need to look at because people are tired. They just do not want to sit in a car for 2 to 3 hours when it really should only take them an hour. So I'm quite sure that the council officers will look into it. We certainly have a problem with the large trucks because we, as Councillor Intarge was saying, that, you know, those big trucks have got to get along the road somewhere because they've got to get from development to development, and we don't have the infrastructure for that to happen. The Riverside development, we've got a problem because one of the big depots are over there, so the big trucks have got to get along Russell Street. But I'm told by one of my other reliable sources that 40 years ago, when the Industrial Avenue was promised, that the entrance and exit would come off the freeway. So I don't know, and no one in this room is guilty.
Councillor Marcus, 1 minute.
None of the people in this place are guilty for that, but I don't know what happened to that entrance and exit off there. But, you know, that development is there. We can't do anything about it. People have bought in there to put big trucks and everything in there. So we've got to certainly see how we can move the big trucks from city to city. I still think that a good we talk about having legacies left to us. I think we have to go forward now that we are not going to leave legacies to anybody in this community. And I invite everybody in this gallery to work with us to make sure that we can get it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillor McElhaney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will be supporting the notice of motion. I believe it is timely and I commend the Mayor for taking a seat aside to talk about it. It is very important. I'd just like to acknowledge our city has a lot of traffic works going on at the moment. A legacy from the previous council, the lobbying that went with Kelly Grigsby and the previous council and this council. This council in the next 2 to 3 years through the state government's getting $1.8 billion worth of roadworks. Our council is doing 40 plus million dollars worth of roadworks. So there's going to be some traffic congestion. There's going to be we've got to be patient. And while we're always going to need roads, there's a huge amount of roadworks that are going to happen in this city in the next 2 to 3 years. So we've just got to be mindful of it and be patient. And I think with that, as well as the report, the notice of motion and the planning, I mean, we can complain we don't have enough roads. We'll probably never have enough roads. But I just remind the council of the legacy of the previous council and the hard work, as well as our work with nearly $2 billion worth of roadworks going on in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McElwain. Any further speakers? If not, I'll ask Councillor Short. Sorry, Peter. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Support the notice of motion completely. I'd just like to say that I think in an holistic approach that I've no doubt that this city will take, we will certainly be considering, as well as roads, other forms of transport, both pedestrian, bicycle and all these sorts of things to ensure that we get the best outcome for the residents in this city. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Maynard. There being no further discussion, I'd ask the Mayor to close the debate, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I don't have any other sort of further comments to make other than just to say thank you to those councillors who spoke in support. Very much appreciated.
Thank you, councillors. I'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Yeah, that's good. Thank you again, Mr Deputy Mayor. So item 8, Council Seal, item 8.1, awarding of contract C2026/18, alterations at the Tarneet Community Learning Centre. The report is on pages 136 to 142. The recommendation is on page 137. Attachments are nil. Councillors, do I have a mover for this item? Councillor Khan. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Barlow. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Khan, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, this is a great library now. It's getting a lot of people attracted now, and it's been used quite a lot now. When I've seen, my family and some other people have used this particularly, and I believe that it's needed more space, and this is a great way of extending that this alternation. It will help the more kids are using more. It's really great places, since now there's a lot of housing coming surrounding this area. We'll be having more traffic. We'll have more users for this library. So I think it's a good way forward to getting alternation done. We'll have more space for the users. We'll be supporting. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Do I have any other speakers for this item? Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I'm very pleased to see that we're going to issue the contract to the successful tenderer. And what this actually shows us, I think, is the conundrum that we have as a council, where not only have we got great demands placed upon us to build new community centres, new libraries, new sporting facilities, etc., and it's incumbent on us to go back and revisit the older areas where we have done recently with Mossfield Reserve, where that's being updated, because it's been like that for about 50 years. I can remember when I first moved to Hoppers Crossing. And we also, of course, even with new projects, and the Tarneet Library and Community Centre is relatively new in speaking terms for this community, that we recognise, just like we did with the Point Cook Learning Centre, that we do have to put in a large amount of money to go back and retrofit because of the growth. So, in fact, actually retrofitting for the additional growth in the area is cheaper than actually building a new one a kilometre or so down the road at this stage. So, so I welcome this, because there is a great demand. People are moving in. And all those people that are moving in, I'm sure, are bringing their driving habits with us, as we discussed earlier, and clogging up the roads. But I I can tell you back 50 years ago when there was a 12 or 15,000 of us living in the city of Wyndham, we had roads then that were clogged up, and not as badly as what they are now, but they were clogged. And that was recognised by the state government in the late 50s, early 60s when they built the Maltby bypass to stop all the Geelong traffic from driving down the main street of Werribee, which was a great initiative 60 plus years ago, I'd say. Well, I should say probably longer. But anyway, I am looking forward to this Tarneet expansion, and I look forward to being there if we're fortunate enough to cut the ribbon and to open up the new part. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Are there any other speakers on this item? Councillor Maynard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be short and sweet. Suffice to say that as this council, as well as being aware of what the current and future needs of our residents are within this city, it also shows that we are continually and consistently looking at what we've previously provided to ensure that it meets the needs of the residents, and hence, if we have to, go back and retrofit facilities. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have any other speakers on this item? Councillors, I now put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 9, contract summary. There is nil. Item 10, questions with notice from the public gallery. Madam CEO, do we have any questions from the gallery this evening?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We do have a number of questions to get through this evening. We've got approximately 7 actually, so it will take some time to work through these, so I will ask for your indulgence. The first questions I have are from Ian Parry. Is Ian Parry in the gallery this evening? Okay, thanks, Ian. So the first question, I'll take these one at a time, given the complexity of the question. So the first one reads, with regard to the proposed waste to energy facility at 28 Alex Fraser Drive, Laversham North, the Planning and Environment Act and the Industrial 2 Zone set out criteria for council in deciding whether to grant planning approval, and in particular the likely effects of the facility on the neighbourhood, including noise levels, airborne emissions and emissions to land or water. Council must be satisfied that the off-site environmental impacts are accessible. The council officer report makes it clear the permit applicant did not provide any specialist information about these matters and that council has undertaken no independent assessment of them. How can council determine to approve the facility when it has not taken into consideration the assessment of the facility against the criteria set out in the Act and planning scheme and has insufficient information to consider the impacts on surrounding issues? So, Madam Mayor, I will refer that question to Stephen Thorpe, our Director of City Operations, for a response.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Through Madam Mayor. So thank you, Mr Parry, for your question. The application is considered to adequately address the relevant provisions of the Wyndham Planning Scheme and the Planning and Environment Act. Council has met its responsibilities in referring the application to the EPA, and as discussed earlier, in this instance, the EPA responsible for the detailed assessment of the environmental emissions from the proposed facility through the works approval process that they will run. It is worth noting that the EPA had no objection to a permit being issued. The planning permit also includes a condition that the use must not adversely affect the amenity of the locality, including emissions, noise, waste products, or otherwise. That's condition 29. Thank you, Madam CEO.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, the second question has in part been answered, but for completeness, I will read out that question. Again, the question's been received from Anne Parry. The question reads, with regard to the proposed waste to energy facility, if council is to rely on the EPA's detailed assessment of the environmental impacts of the facility, why wouldn't this occur after the EPA has determined the works approval application so that the application can be informed by the applicant's technical analysis and by the EPA's independent assessment of that analysis? So again, Madam Mayor, I will ask our Director City Operations, Stephen Thorpe, to respond.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you again, Mr Parry. It is normal practice for the issuing of planning permit to be separate to the EPA works approval process. As I mentioned, we have liaised with them through this planning permit process, and I have no objection to the planning permit being determined prior to their works approval process. And again, council has assessed the application and is satisfied that the applicant has merit from a planning perspective. Thank you, Madam CEO.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. So moving on now to two questions received from Lisa Heinrichs, who I note is in the gallery this evening. Thanks for your question, Lisa. So the first one is regarding councillors' response to waste recyclables, and it reads, although I have asked this question of my Imaru ward councillors and received a response claiming commercial in confidence, I don't believe that this can be claimed, as I'm not asking for financials or contractual arrangements, so therefore I submit my question to council. Even though our Wyndham recyclables won't be going into the tip, will recyclable materials from other councils that dump here still be going in? So there's two parts to this question. Part B is what municipalities currently dump at Werribee Tip, and C, if yes, which municipalities will they be coming from? So for this first question, I will again, Madam Mayor, refer this through to Stephen Thorpe, our Director of City Operations, for a response.
So thank you, Madam CEO. Through you, Madam Mayor. So thank you, Ms Heinrichs, for the question. As previously advised, council is unable to respond to your question. Our customers at the refuse disposal facility and the waste they choose to bring to the facility are commercial in confidence. Thank you, Madam CEO.
Thank you for that. Through you, Madam Mayor, again, a question from Lisa Heinrichs. Question 2, could council please explain why the Loop, heavily spruiked on social media, is a way for the Wyndham community to have a say on major projects, policy and plans happening in our city, does not contain a link or information on submitting a nomination for the Significant Tree Register? Is the Significant Tree Register itself not significant enough to be included? Again, there's two parts to this question. Why was myself and Lisa Lisa representing Wyndham Community Activist Group told at a meeting with the Iramu councillors present at two representatives of the National Trust and a representative of Council's Environment and Water team that we could submit the Calder Memorial trees as a group in a document we have spent months on, measuring and photographing the trees, only to be informed last week by council when I tried to submit the document that I have to submit each tree individual, and I apologise for the clunkiness in my reading of that question. I will, Madam Mayor, refer that through to our Director of Livability, over to Peter McKinnon. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for the question. Thanks for your feedback in relation to the Loop. It's an additional platform, as you know, for sharing information, and we would like to get the Significant Tree Register on there. We understand it's an important tool for the Wyndham City to consult with the community, particularly when it comes to seeking feedback on new policies, strategies and associated council initiatives. So we're going to take on board your feedback and explore that opportunity to promote the Significant Tree Register using that platform, including the nomination form on that platform if possible. Now, in response to your opportunity to nominate a group of trees, we are completely supportive of the Wyndham Community Activist Group's nomination of trees along Princess Highway and welcome that submission. And we acknowledge that the newly established process for Wyndham Significant Tree Register on our website does not necessarily allow for the nomination of multiple trees at once. However, council will be willing to accept that report as a whole for consideration and will be in contact with you shortly in the coming days to provide an appropriate contact email address to get that whole report in its entirety. So thank you.
Thank you for that response, and thank you, Madam Mayor. So I now have two questions from Troy Matthews. Is Troy Matthews in the gallery this evening? Hi, Troy. Thanks for your questions. They do relate to the same matter, but I will read them out separately for a separate response to each of these. In reference to item 6.4.1, the heritage overlay at Carter Avenue, a table providing classification of the houses has either contributory of non-contributory is set out on page 69 of the agenda. Numbers 23 and 25 are listed as contributory, which has changed since the draft heritage citation was circulated to owners on the 14th of November 2018. So why was the classification changed? So if I could ask again for Mr McKinnon to provide a response to that question, and then I'll ask the question too relating to the same matter. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam CEO, and thank you for the question, Troy. Local residents were invited to a public forum, I think on the 12th of November last year, and at that forum 2 documents were provided, one being a preliminary Carter Avenue heritage study, which was dated April 2016, and then a second draft heritage citation dated May 2018. Troy, you're correct in that the preliminary study did not include 23 and 25 Carter Avenue as contributory buildings. However, the draft heritage citation, which has got the more detailed heritage assessment, did. We acknowledge this change and we're seeking clarification from a relevant heritage consultant and will provide you with a detailed written response.
Thank you. And Madam Mayor, one final question, again relating to the same matter. What is the council going to do to provide the local community and visitors with information about the historical nature of the street, and how will council promote the positive social effect as claimed in section 7, and in brackets there, reference made to social implications? So again, I'd ask Mr McKinnon to respond to that question.
Thank you, Madam CEO. And once again, Troy, so in the future, what we intend to do is work with our local heritage groups and interest groups, as well as our Heritage Portfolio Committee, to create a communication package which includes online tools which will communicate and celebrate Wyndham's rich history, including the Carter Avenue estate, to our growing community, which may not be aware of the many jewels in our city's rich history. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I do have some final questions, and unfortunately these have been submitted by Joseph Shembry, who is a regular attender at our meetings. But Joseph, given the nature of the questions that you've lodged tonight, I'm not in a position to read them because there's quite a bit of detail in these questions, and they relate very specifically to allegations against a staff member dating back to the sort of mid-1990s, and it's in regards to matters that you've raised before council before, particularly surrounding the Point Cook airfield and so on. Of course, we're happy to respond to these questions, but because of the rules in place that govern our local meeting procedure, because the questions do actually implicate or could embarrass someone. In this case, it relates to an employee that you specifically named in these questions dating back to the 90s. We are unable to read that question out in detail tonight, but I am happy to provide you with a written response to the questions that you've raised. And also, just Madam Mayor, for the benefit of council and the gallery this evening, I understand, Mr Shembray, that you've actually requested access to the information via a Freedom of Information request. So under the FOI provisions, we're working to go through our records over a number of years to provide you with access to the information that you've requested. So I just wanted to be clear that we will furnish you with that information in fullness with a really complete response. But given the rules that govern our meeting procedure tonight, unfortunately, Madam Mayor, I'm not in a position to be able to read out the question, just given the nature of it. So we will be responding as per your FOI request through our normal custom and practice and as per the provisions really set out by government in regards to the Freedom of Information Act. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Item 11, Councillor Delegate Reports. Item 11.1, Councillor Delegate Reports. The report is on pages 143 to 144. The recommendation is on page 144 and the attachments are on page 145 to 150. Councillors, do I have a mover for this item? Councillor McElhinney, do I have a seconder? Councillor Gibbons, thank you. Are there any councillors that would like to speak to their report? Councillor Marcus.
Thank you. I would like to say that my portfolio is environment and sustainability, and I would just like to thank all councillors tonight for supporting our single-use plastic. So thank you very much. That's a great step forward. I would also like to thank our committee members who come to the meetings every 3 months and work really hard. The environment, we believe, is a very important part of this city, because if we don't have a good, clean environment, you know, we won't have a very good, clean city. And we have been really busy. We've been working on the coastal management plan update. We've been working on the discussions for a master plan for the K Road Clift. We've been working on, as Mr McKinnon said, the tree register, and we're also now working very heavily with the farmers at Werribee South because they're in dire straits, and if we do not get rain, they will have no river water, and therefore they just will not be able to sustain good crops. They're down to about 3 crops now, and they can only grow cauliflower, broccoli and one other variety. The lettuces are just not viable. So we are working very hard with all of those, and thank you to our committee members for coming tonight to support us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Is there any other councillor like to speak to their report? Thank you, councillors. Councillors, I now put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 12, urgent business. Madam CEO, do we have any urgent business?
No, Madam Mayor, not this evening.
Thank you. Item 13, confidential business. Councillors, can I have a mover to suspend standing orders for confidential business, please? Councillor Maynard?
Madam Mayor, motion is that pursuant to section 89(2) of the Local Government Act 1989, standing orders be suspended and this meeting of council be closed to members of the public in order for council to discuss confidential business.
Thank you, Councillor Maynard. Councillors, do I have a mover for this item? A seconder, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Gibbons. Councillors, I now put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Thank you. Recommendations of the closed meeting. Sorry.
That's all right. It'll come.
Thank you. Can I call for a motion that the recommendations of the closed meeting of council with regard to confidential matters be adopted? Councillors, do I have a mover for this item? Councillor Khan, do I have a seconder? Councillor Gibbons, thank you. Councillors, I now put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. I now declare this meeting closed at 8:42 p.m. Thank you, councillors, and thank you, members of the gallery. Good night, everybody.